Chapter 6 Intersexual Hierarchies. One of the withdrawal symptoms of unplugging from the matrix of the blue pill existence is usually an overwhelming nihilism that results from being torn away from the previous blue pill preconceptions a man has been conditioned to for most of his life. It is my hope that in the future red pill men will make the necessary intervention and apply what they have learned from their unplugging and the red pill rules in general towards their sons and daughters, as well as other men they know or related to. Unfortunately, until then, the process of breaking away from that conditioning is usually going to begin as a result of traumatic breakup, a divorce, or having had the rational equity a man thought he will build a long-term relationship on provided worthless in the face of hypergamy. It is sad reality of unplugging that it is most often starts as a result of emotional anguish, but to pour salt in those wounds is then having to live in the harsh real lives that the red pill makes men aware of, that more or less everything they held on an ego investment up to that point was founded on feminine primary conditioning. I summed this up in the first book with the bitter taste of the red pill. The truth will set you free, but it doesn't make the truth hurt any less, nor does it make any truth prettier, and it certainly doesn't absolve you of the responsibility that truth requires. One of the biggest obstacles guys face in unplugging and accepting the hard truths the game forces upon them. Among these is bearing the burden of realizing that you have been conditioned to believe for so long where ideals of loving and expectation are real liabilities. Call them lies if you want, but there is a certain hopelessness nihilism that accompanies categorizing what really amounts to a system that you are cut away from. It is not that you are hopeless, it is that you lack the insight at this point to see that you can create hope in your system, one in which you have more direct control over. Try to keep this last part in mind as you read, and I propose in this section. I read a lot of guys in various forums getting disappointed after having the red pill make sense of them. But the despondency is really a simple lack of not having a path already preset for them to follow. Instead of the easy answers and the prerequisite responsibility that the red pill and the feminine imperative had ready for him to follow, now in this new awareness, he is tasked with making a new path for himself, and that's both scary and exciting at the same time. Love styles. In almost 4 years of blogging and a book written, my 3 most popular posts have been the love series, Women in Love, Men in Love, and Of Love and War, found in the Rational Male. Though my SMV graph gets most likes back, the love series are always the most viewed post on the Rational Male blog. Unfortunately, they are often the most misquoted and misunderstood. One of the toughest revelations of the red pill is coming to terms with the difference in experience and the concept that men and women apply to love. The core principle in women is love usually misunderstood upon first reading. For different reasons, deliberate or otherwise, both men and women critically misunderstand the main premises of that essay, Iron Rule of Tomasi, verse 6. Women are utterly incapable of loving a man in the way that a man expects to be loved. In its simplicity, this speaks volumes about the condition of men. It accurately expresses a passive nihilism that men must either confront and accept, or be driven insane in denial for the rest of their lives when they fail to come to terms with the disillusionment. Women are incapable of loving men in a way that a man idealizes is possible, in a way that he thinks he should be capable of. Most critics of this assessment on how either sex interprets and considers love tend to blow past this last part. They oversimplify my meaning and sputter on something to that effect, that Tomasi guy thinks that women can't ever really love men. What prosperous crap. Of course, that isn't my assertion, but I understand they want to dismiss this notion, particularly for men and women invested in the ideal of egalitarian equalism. It is a threat to the ego investment that men and women are anything less of co-equal and fully rational agents who come together for a mutual agreeable benefit. The simple mechanics of women innate hypergamy puts the lie to this presumption as well as confirms the relevancy of women constant, qualitative conditionary for whom really what they love. I think it's ironical that the same people who disparage these concepts are among the first to readily embrace the post-psychology notion of love languages. I get why this idea pisses off women and feminist men. It is very unflattering to be accused of loving men from a position of opportunism. However, it is important to understand that I don't make this observation to condemn the way women approach love, although I am sure I will follow my point isn't to presume the right or wrong way for women to love men or vice versa. There are beneficial and detrimental aspects of women's opportunistic approach to love and men's idealistic approach to love. That said, I happen to believe that the differing ways men and women love each other evolve to be complementary to the other, each sex strength compensating for the weakness of the other. For all the OMG, I can't believe this red pill asshole thinks women can't really love men, misdirection. I should point out that well-intentioned men, especially the newly red pill, are often guilty of a similar oversimplification. There is an attempt to find validation in the usually recent trauma of having been cut away from the prior blue pill conditioning, a result sentiment of Rollo says women can't really love men. Of course, it's all so clear to me. Now I know why she left me, satisfies a simplistic need for confirmation of their former condition. And again, it is not right or wrong way of loving, it is the lack of recognizing there is a difference in men and women conceptions of love and being on the punishing side of that lack. Most men will want to apply their concepts of honor or justice in assessing how right men idealistic love is, while women will still see the inherent value in loving what man is a prerequisite for loving who a man is. Hypergamy doesn't care about men's idealistic expectation of love, but neither does men rationally make consciousness for the facilities women opportunistic approach to love. Romantic souls. I pulled the following quote from a post of the Red Pill subreddit forum. My whole life, I've had it nailed into me that I would be able to find true love if I was honest and hardworking. As I grew older, if I am somewhat fit and have a good job making 60 to 80k a year, I will find the beautiful girl that loves me as I love her. As I have stated on many occasions, it is men who are true romantics granted. It is the indeliberate result of centuries of evolved counter love, but in the realm that qualifies as a true act of romance, it is men who are the primary actors. It is men who make or want to make a romance happen. And of course, therein lies the problem. A man cannot make romance happen for a woman. For all a man's very imaginative, creative endeavors to manufacture a romance that will endeavor a woman to him, he is trying to do so of what disqualifies his intent. For every carefully planned date night after marriage, there is a college girl suing to bang her boyfriend living in a shithole shit over the windows, furniture from the dumpster, pounding shitty beer and sleeping on the soiled mattress on the floor. Romance isn't created, romance just happens, and it is a tough but valuable lessons when men come to realize that happenstance, bag of Skittles, or a ring made from a gum wrapper in the right place at the right time meant more to a woman than every expensive contrived romantic getaway he'd ever thought would satisfy her need to love a romance. An important part of the red pill is learning that the most memorable acts of love a man can commit with a woman are acts of seeming or genuine spontaneity and never apparently the overly planned, and yes, that applies to sex as well. This is a source of real frustration for a man since his blue pill conditioning expects the opposite from him, and his romantic nature, the nature that wants her to love him as he loves her, conspires with his problem solving nature, thus prompting him to ever greater romantic planning for what he hopes will be appreciated and reciprocated love. The hierarchy. The true source of a man's frustration lies in the misdirected hope that a woman's concept of love matches his own. This ideal is a beautiful girl that loves him the same way he loves her. The presumptions a romantic one perpetuated by the myth of egalitarian equalism, is that his concept of idealized love is a universal one, which women share with men in general and in particular. Thanks mostly to men's blue pill conditioning, what men fail ever to consider is that women's hypergamatic based love always considers what he is before she invests herself in who she is. This is the root of the intersexual hierarchy of love, the conventional model: man, woman, children. Before the rise of the feminine social primary, the above flowchart of love prioritization would hardly have been the afterthought for man. Through any number of evolutionary and sociological progression, the base understanding of how men's love began from a position of protecting, provisioning for, and stewarding the lives of both his wife and children wasn't a concern worth much of his conscious consideration. Neither was a prevailing desire for a reciprocal model for love overshadowing concern it is for men today. To be sure, a baseline requirement of a returned love, sex, respect, and fidelity were important elements, but this wasn't the originating basis of male desire for being loved. There was no expectation of a woman loving him as he loved her, and an extension their children. To be a man was to have the capacity to provide and sustain a surplus resources beyond his own provisioning, while providing a sense of protection and security. In the series Breaking Bad, an interesting dialogue is exchanged between the characters Walter White and Gustavo when he convinces Walter to cook meth for him in order to ensure he supports the security of his family before he dies from cancer. Quote, "A man provides, and he does it even when he is not appreciated or respected or even looked or even loved. He simply bears up, and he does it because he is a man." You can look the clip up on YouTube, but Gustavo's monologue seems like an anachronism, especially in the light of the red pill awareness of the potential for injustice and in the veritable certainty of provisioning arrangement that will be one-sided proposition for a man, whether he is loved, respected, appreciated, married, or divorced. Undoubtedly, there will be men reading this pristine at the idea of an equitable model for love, but know that this idea of equitable model is the result of conditioning that an egalitarian equalism has predisposed men to believe is even possible. Before the rise of the feminine primacy, a man's expression of love through his support and guidance simply weren't things women or children had the capacity to reciprocate. The advent of women's independency, real or imagined, has served to strip men of his core understanding and the differences between male and female concepts of love. In the effort to feminize men more fully and position men in a condition of confusion about the constitutes masculinity, this concept of love was replaced by a feminine primary model of love. While a woman's respect and the degree of love may flow back to her man, her primary love and concern is directed towards her children. One reason we are still shocked by women who kill their children, pre or postnatal, is due to the inherent acknowledgement of this natural dynamic. Women's brain function and biochemistry largely evolved to predispose them to bonding with their children and thus ensure the survival of the species. Beyond the rigors of the physical gestating a child, raising children to self-sufficiency required considerable investment of effort and resources, not to mention constant attention. Nature selected for women with an innate biological and psychological capacity to nurture and direct love primarily toward their offspring. The eternal psychology women evolved to vet for men who displayed traits for both alpha physical proneness and parental investment, provisioning potential are a result of children being one directional priority for woman's love. While a degree of maintaining man's continued personal investment and commitment to the family unit requires her attention in form of sex and affection, a woman's primary love focus is directed towards children. Granted, not all women are capable of having children, or some even desirous of them, but even in these instances, substitute love priority still supersedes directing her primary attention towards a man. It may seem like I am attempting to paint woman's love a callous or indifferent, but this directioning isn't a conscious or deliberate act, but rather it is due to her innate understanding that a man is to direct his love towards her as a priority. The feminine primary model. Woman to man, woman to children. Quote, "Don't wait for the good woman. She doesn't exist. There are women who can make you feel more with their bodies and their souls, but these are the exact women who will turn the knife into you right in front of the crowd. Of course, I expect this, but the knife still cuts. The female loves to play man against man, and if she is in a position to do it, there is not one who will resist. The male, for all this bravado and exploration, is the royal one, the one who genuinely feels love. The female is skilled at betrayal and torture and denunciation. Never envy a man his lady. Behind it all lies a living hell." End of quote. Charles Bukowski. For my more opportunistic readers, you'll be happy to know I don't entirely agree with Mr. Bukowski's statement. However, Charles gives us a great introduction to the next progression of the intersexual hierarchies. While I am not sure every woman is as skilled as the next in betrayal, torture, and demotion, as Charles waxes poetic about, I do believe that this understanding of the male nature is not only accurate, but the same male nature is actually the source of equating women with betrayal, torture, and damnation. It is not that women are inherently evil, it is that men's idealism makes them so available for being betrayed, tortured, and damned. If you are all familiar with Charles Bukowski, you will know he was one of the last true sons of bitches. The unapologetic epitome of gloriously arrogant self-concern and the masculine independence. For what he lacked in polish, he made up for the talent and a brutal honesty that could never be acknowledged in a feminine-centric society order of today. In the mid-60s, he was a feral, instinctually red pill man. Charles, for his musing of women, knew that it was the male nature that facilitated women's damaging of men. The feminists of this generation and today simply dismiss him as relic and a misogynist era, but his real insight wasn't about women, but rather about men's inner workings. The male, for all his bravado and exploration, is the royal one, and the one who generally feels love. I like to believe that Bukowski was ahead of his time with this. However, I think it's more accurate to presume that due to the constant feminine primary socialization, men have been conditioned to interpret love in a feminine pretext, rather than acknowledging men and women approach love from different conceptual perspectives. In light of these differing, often conflicting concepts of male idealistic and female opportunistic love, it is easy to see how a man might find women duplicitous, torturous, and damnable, particularly when his feminine sensitivity training predisposes him to believe women share the same love idealism he is being encouraged to believe. The feminine primary model of love is the idealistic fantasy that vast majority of women have been conditioned to presume in a universal model of love. In this fantasy, a woman reciprocates the same idealism he has about how he should feel about his based off his masculine idealistic concept of love. That love eventually must, potentially, include children, but the fantasy begins for him with the woman concept of love agreeing for his own love-to-love sex approach. Rather, the performance-based opportunistic approach for women require men in order to love them. The best illustration I can apply for this model is found in every tough lesson taught in the movie Blue Valentine. Look this film up in the IMDb or Netflix. The plot of this film graphically outlines the conflict that occurs when a man conflates his idealism of the feminine primary model of love with women's opportunistic model of love. That idealism is exacerbated by feminine primary conditioning since early childhood that prepares him to expect girls and women will share in it. When you look at this model objectively, you can't help but see the Disney-esque, brutal promise of a mutually reciprocated love. Men being the true romantic predispose themselves to wanting to believe this model is really the only mutually acceptable model. The dispelling of the fantasy this model represents is one of the most difficult aspects of coming into terms with the red pill awareness. In fact, one of the primary reasons men become hostile to the red pill is an inability to imagine any other possible model. For most men, the despairing of this fantasy comes after he reached the happily ever after part of his schema and he realizes the conditionality his wife places on her terms of loving him. Too late, he is forced into realization that women's love model is based upon what he is before who he is. While there is a definitive conditionality placed on her love, men don't necessarily expect an unconditional love. It is usually at this stage that men are conveniently expected or expect themselves to man up and earn a woman's mutually reciprocated love by adopting the male responsibility aspects of the first conventional model. A man provides, and for all his previous equalist conditioning that made him believe a woman would love him for who he is, that made him believe a woman would love him as he loves her, he blames his inability to achieve that idealistic love on himself for not living up to being a man, deserving of feminine primary model of ideal love. What he's really done is conceived himself accepting a woman's opportunistic model while retaining the idealism he has been conditioned never to reject, thereby leaving her blameless in her own concepts of love and making him accountable to it. It is hard to consider this model without presuming a woman's manipulative intent of a man, but let me settle emphatically that, for the better part, I believe most women simply aren't specifically aware of the subconscious instinctual mechanism behind this intersexual hierarchy model. Through any number of the ways women are sociable to presume that their feminine primary position implies that men should necessarily take the life and maturity steps needed to fulfill women's hypergamy-motivated, opportunistic approach over the course of their lifetime. We like to bemoan this as a feminine entitlement, and yes, it can get, and this getting so, abusively out of hand, but this entitlement and expectation originate in women's opportunistic approach towards love. Men are the romantics pretending to be realist, and women vice versa. The subdominant model. Man to children, man to women. Finally, we come to the male subdominant model wherein a man, by conditioning and circumstances, expects love from a woman and he would from a mothering dynamic. Often this situation seems to result from the overly enthusiastic belief in the egalitarian gender equality and parallelism, but the underlying motivation is really an abduction of masculinity and by association, abdication of the conventional masculine responsibility. There simply is no presumption of a conventionally masculine headship prior to or into a long-term relationship. There are men I call pre-whipped, men so thoroughly conditioned, men who have so internalized their conditioning that they mentally prepare themselves for total surrender to the feminine imperative that they already make the perfect beta provider before they even meet the woman whom they will make their sacrifice. They have internalized a conditioned expectation to acquaintance to a feminine defined frame before any woman expects him for intimacy. The social undercurrent of an ideal gender equalism plays an active role in creating these men, and specifically this hierarchical model. Unfortunately, the social and the personal illusion of control this model is idealistically based upon is usually overshadowed by the conventional male-dominant, female-submissive expectation of a mutually fluid, complementary love model. These are the house-husband arrangements, and the gender is a social construct relationship. While the cope is one of the realized egalitarian equalism with a relationship, the psychological struggle eventually becomes one of the dominant and the submissive gender expectation in the pairing. In an era where hypergamy has been given free rein, it is no longer men provisioning that dictates a woman's predisposition to want to be a submissive partner in a relationship. To an increasingly larger degree, women no longer depend upon men for provision, security, and emotional support. That used to be buffer against their innate hypergamous impulse. What's left is a society of women using the satisfaction of optimized hypergamy as their only benchmark for rational gratification. Men in the alpha capacity to meet the raw, feral demands of women hypergamy are exceedingly rare. And thanks to the incessant progress of the feminization are being further pushed to marginalization. The demand for men who meet women increasingly overestimated sense of hypergamatic self-worth make the men women who could submit to precocious a commodity and increase further stress on the modern sexual marketplace. For all the mental and the social awareness necessitated by this equalist fantasy, men subscribing to this model inevitably fall into the submissive, conventionally feminine role. Underneath all the trappings that make this model seem imbalanced in the reversal conventional roles, which places women into love flow state, men are better suited for since their approach to love originates from idealism and not a small amount of martyr-like sacrifice for that idealism. The expectation of feminized men then becomes one of the woman adopting men's idealistic concept of love for love's sake, only to be gravely disappointed when they discover that women simply lack the capacity for it. Essentially, this model forces a woman not only to mother her children, but also her husband. The most common complaint you'll hear from women forced into this conventional masculine expectation is their resentment of having to play mommy for their husband because he is incapable of taking care of himself. In the beginning of this section, I stated that women and men approach to love was ultimately complementary to one another, and in the past model, we can see how the two approaches, idealistic and opportunistic, dovetail together. That may seem a bit strange at this point, but when social affluences imbalance this conventional complement, we see how those two should come together. When a woman opportunistic approach to love is cast in the primary dominant role paradigm for a couple and a family, the pairing and family is now at the mercy of the opportunistic necessitated by the woman's hypergamy and the drive to optimize it. Conversely, when a man idealistic approach to love is the dominant frame, as in the conventional model, it acts as a buffer to women loving opportunism that would otherwise imbalance and threaten the endurance of the family and relationship. Arguments about chores, money, sex life and romance are most common in couples where the woman makes most of the family decision. Female decision-making status is an even stronger determinant of relationship dissatisfaction when female breadwinner status. Women can handle making more money in a relationship, but they despise being the leader in that relationship. Argument frequency decreased among female breadwinners if they were not the primary decision makers. When a woman's love concept is the dominant one, the relationship will be governed by her opportunism and the quest for hypergamatic optimization. The ultimate desire end of the optimization is a conventional love hierarchy, where the dominant man is the driving, decisive member of the sexual pairing. End of chapter 6.